A new look at the Flint water crisis. Is it even worse than we realized? Far from the southern border, the immigration issue is bigger than many realize. And raising your financial IQ. Today is Sunday, September 15, 2019, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. I'm glad you're here with us this morning. It was another busy week, and in our newsroom, we had our head on a swivel going back and forth from Lansing to Washington. But while watching the budget rodeo at the state capitol, or the General Motors UAW contract dance, or the departure of a national security advisor, John Bolton, maybe you missed a piece of eye-popping reporting from Frontline on PBS. They dug into the Flint water crisis, and to their calculus, the death toll should be much higher than the 12 we generally mention as having died from Legionnaire's disease. Frontline believes the number is closer to 70. That's just one of a number of holy smokes moments from their account, and we're going to talk about that coming up this morning. Also, we have, of course, talked quite a bit about immigration. Typically, because the focus has been along the southern border, we focus on southern border states like Texas and California. But a new study shows Michigan has the fourth highest number of refugees who've come to the U.S. since 2012. And the groups and service organizations that assist them are often overwhelmed. We're going to talk about that too. And there's a new project that hopes to take on a problem that has long vexed Detroit, as it does most large urban centers, creating financial literacy. It's all this morning on Flashpoint.
The scientists say they met with Nick Lyon to urge him to step up surveillance for Legionnaire's cases.
I remember my colleague telling him that if he didn't do that, people could die. Unfortunately, Nick Lyon's response was that, well, they have to die of something.
That's just part of the PBS Frontline report, Flint's deadly water, that premiered this week. Even though we heard that in the court transcript, something else to hear the scientists repeat it. The report, though, also suggests there may be many more deaths attached to the crisis than we believed. One of the reporters on Flint's deadly water is Kayla Ruble, and she is my first guest this morning. Kayla, thank you very much for being here. It's great to have you here. You've had a busy week, I know, since its premiere on a program that you worked about 2 years on bringing. Exactly. But let's start with, I think, the headline for most people. We have said 12 people dying of Legionnaire's disease, and to your reckoning and the way you've looked at it, it's likely many, many more.
Right. So there was about an 18-month period between when the Legionnaire's disease outbreak started in 2014 and when it was announced to the public and the medical community at large. So experts that we spoke to really pointed to the question that in many of these cases could have gone undiagnosed because people wouldn't have been aware to look for Legionnaire's disease when patients were coming in with pneumonia symptoms, and it would have been diagnosed as maybe general pneumonia. So what we did was looked at all of the pneumonia deaths in Genesee County over a 7-year time period, and we took that information to scientists at Emory University who did statistical modeling to analyze, was there an increase in pneumonia deaths during the water crisis, and was it statistically significant? And we found out, in fact, it was. Yes to both of those questions. And what we found were there were about 70 additional deaths, excess deaths, more than you would have expected in Genesee County had there not been a Legionnaire's disease outbreak. And the trend didn't track in any other surrounding counties or similar counties like Dayton, Ohio, Rockford, Illinois. So
I guess it's almost natural. We have a Pavlovian response to the word lead. We all sit up and we understand the horror and the problems that I'm not sure we yet have that reaction to Legionnaire's disease. It's a different kind of problem, but it was also built into this water system, although I guess there's still some dispute over was it the water changeover or was there a problem at the hospital, right?
Right, and I think that caused that's part of the reason why there maybe was less attention paid to it. It's a lot more complicated to understand how Legionnaire's happens, how it gets in the water system, how it maybe could have been in both the hospital and the water system at the same time. And, the outbreak wasn't announced until January 2016 by the governor at the time, and that was about 6 months after the lead in the water really became sort of national news. So if any, I think at that point there was a headline, multiple multiple times a day coming out of Flint, and I think for everywhere from the local level to the national level, it was hard to keep track, and I think Legionnaires was complicated, and it sort of fell by the wayside, even though it was the deadlier of the scenarios. Lead will have, you know, impacts on the city of Flint for decades, but Legionnaires had a really immediate impact on the city.
Immediate. The other thing that's really interesting about the program, we've read lots of emails, we've read lots of transcripts from the trial, on and on and on. It's something very different to hear this group of scientists from both Wayne State and Henry Ford Hospital here in Detroit, who were so they come across as so dismayed at their trip through trying to get the state to listen to them.
Exactly, and I can't imagine that you could talk to any scientist anywhere that would have ever imagined that signing on to study one of the greatest public health crises in at least, you know, a very long time in the United States, that being brought in to study that there would be such obstacles. And so I think that that really was something that surprised us even as we were reporting just what they were up against and, you know, how it impacted them, their work, their reputations. And to hear, I think, some of the conversations happening behind the scenes from these people, that some of these officials that we've, you know, been hearing about over the past few years, but to actually hear those recounted and see how they affect scientists who we don't necessarily think of as being the most, you know, passionate individuals, but to hear these scientists say
that phrase, they're going to have something. Now, Lyon's office disputes that he said that, correct?
Right.
Yes,
which is important to note.
I want to make that clear. I'm really interested about the way that this documentary came together. All of the reporters and the producers on this, you're mostly Michiganders who were living elsewhere and came back to do this story, which I guess creates a different kind of impact on you while you were involved in it.
For sure, I could have never imagined something like this. And I think, you know, there were 4 of us working on it who are from Michigan. 3 of us reporters, one an editor and producer at Frontline. And, you know, Abby, the director, and I, we left our jobs in New York in 2016 after we'd been reporting on the water crisis for a while, and we realized we weren't going to be able to let it go, and it was home. I mean, I grew up 45 minutes north of Flint. And so I think knowing that something like this was happening so close to us after reporting all around the world for our careers, you know, it really just felt like we had to come home. And I think I'm glad that we did, but it is a very different experience.
Well, how did it leave you feeling about your Michigan?
You know, I think the community in Flint has been so amazing and so strong and so welcoming to us, and you know, they will let you into their doors and into their lives. We were showing up on people's doorsteps saying, hi, we think someone here may have died of pneumonia a few years ago. Would you mind talking to us? And the doors were immediately open to us. So that part of my Michigan, I think, has been reinforced of what people are like here and how, and hearing people around the state now after the film is aired saying, how did we not know this? What can we do? And so I think that reaction is really encouraging.
As somebody who's done a lot of documentaries in my life, this is maybe a little inside baseball, but as I was watching this, and I know you spent 2 years putting all this together, and I thought somewhere right when you thought you were reaching the finish line, the Attorney General Dana Nessel decided to drop the charges and start the whole thing over. That must have been a nice day at the office for you.
Yeah, that's always a little bit of a panic when something, you know, that dramatic happens, when we thought we were getting ready to put the final film together. But that's news, right? That's documentary. And I think, you know, in some ways it brought more attention to the story. I think there was it got a lot of national headlines. It was shocking, I think, to everyone from Flint residents to us. But we were able to roll with it, and, you know, luckily both the former prosecutor and the current attorney generals spoke with us. They took time to help us tell that part of the story.
Well, what did that say to you in the approach that the state had been taking? You interviewed Todd Flood you interviewed all the people who had been handling it before under the Snyder administration. Did the change suggest to you that there was a new kind of seriousness to it, or just a different approach? What did it say?
It's hard to tell. You know, we've talked to the former prosecutor, and he stands by his methods, and I think, you know, you did see 2 of his cases get bound over to go to trial.
Right.
But of course, the new Attorney General believes that there were flaws in the investigation, and, you know, feels like they need to do it a different way. That to me is maybe there's a difference of opinions there. It's hard to say at this point how we might see this progress, but I think everyone there at least being transparent there. You know, I think we just saw this week Dana Nessel said she welcomes a bill that legislatures have proposed to extend the statute of limitations, which is important.
Lastly, and I've wondered this for every time I talk to the people of residents of Flint, how long is it going to be before they actually trust that they can go to their faucet and drink the water because just being told by someone isn't going to be enough?
Yeah, that's a great question and something we talk about all the time, and it's a huge issue because when are people going to be able to trust their water, their government, the attorney general, anyone in this whole scenario? And I think with the water, I think a big, the mayor and some of the other officials have really stood by the fact that until all the pipes are replaced, they're not really going to go there. They want to because that's something that could cause issues with the water. I think so. I hope that when we get to that point when the pipes are replaced, that we can find ways to be transparent. I think that's key, being transparent with how they're getting information, how the water quality is testing, and maybe residents will start to trust again.
Let's hope so. Kayla Ruble, one of the reporters on Flint's deadly water. Thank you so much for being here. We will link that for you on clickondetroit.com. I highly recommend you check out the PBS program. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
We come back, we'll talk about immigration in Michigan. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.
Commercial about buying cars. That's a car, this is the phone, and this is drive time. Do you need a car?
Yes, but I don't have a lot of money.
Oh, great. Go online and check out drive time and save that money. Their down payments are $1,000 less on average.
Ooh, this is a car commercial. Will there be a phony focus group?
Nope. Just valuable information. 99% of people who apply get approved, even if their credit is You can do it in 2 minutes from anywhere. All you need is your phone.
I have a phone.
Everybody does.
Yeah, I'm done. I got approved.
Go to drivetime.com and get approved in 2 minutes. Drive time. Genius.
Substance use, disabilities, and mental health concerns affect us all in one way or another. With treatment and support, recovery is possible for everyone. If you or someone you love is struggling with suicidal thoughts, feelings of hopelessness, or just needs a listening ear on the journey to recovery, there is hope and there is help. Get connected with a mental health professional when you contact the Detroit Wayne Mental Health Authority 24/7, 800-241-4949. Here to talk, here to help.
Monday at 5. How could this mother's breast milk lead to her husband's arrest? She was found dead in her room.
A mom breastfeeding a baby, that doesn't happen.
5 years later, her husband is charged with murder.
We believe he put heroin into her cereal.
Now, defender Karen Drew connects the dots in this bizarre case.
Had any comment on the Jason Harris case?
They've been terrified silently for 5 years.
Monday on Local 4 News at 5.
There are well more than 500,000 people living in Michigan who were born in another country. A new report shows large gaps in our systems designed to help immigrants and refugees. And the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan feels the report is a call to action for them and the wider foundation and service family. The head of that foundation, back with us on Flashpoint, is Miriam Nolan. Good to have you back. Thanks so much for being here. This is a really interesting report. I think we all have understood there's a really unique immigrant flavor to Michigan. I'm not sure we understood that we were fourth in the country when it comes to refugees, ahead of even Florida.
Surprise to me also. That's why the report's really important. And it really is a report about what are the needs of those people that are here. Are they being served? How can they be better served? And the real crisis is that the needs are there, the dollars coming from the federal, state sources are down.
Dwindling, yes.
And so these nonprofits that are doing the really, really important work need more private support.
Now, in the last 2 years, the influx of refugees has also gone down. So what do you do with people who say, well, your problem is getting less rather than more? You've got fewer people to deal with. Really, since Donald Trump became president, we have seen far fewer refugees coming into Michigan.
Well, the refugees that were coming were largely Muslim-speaking, not totally, but that number is now down. But there are people here in need today. And so our concern is, are they being served? How better can they be served? And what can the philanthropic sector do? What can the foundations do? Is there some strategy we ought to put behind it? Because it's probably not going to go away.
Well, you are one of the more adroit movers and shakers and community leaders, I would say, in Southeast Michigan. So vital in putting together the grand bargain. But I wondered when I looked at this, I was like, of course, Miriam understands how almost by definition this is political now. And you find yourself, are you comfortable with it being a political argument? Which is because some people are going to say, you need to be worried about the people who are here legally, rather than all of them together, because I don't think you're trying to make the distinction about that, right?
Well, we don't view it as political. We view it as human needs, and we're about meeting human needs, whatever their circumstance happens to be. And the fact that these needs are real they are significant, and they are going up. It's basic things. It's housing, it's food, it's transportation, it's trying to be able to improve themselves. But most are in poverty status, and so as a community foundation and our foundation partners, we really want to meet those human needs. So I don't view it as political.
Others, of course, will, because it's just the nature of the time we live in. You have boiled this down to 4 big problems. And the biggest one is lack of access to the services that do exist, trying to connect the people with what you already have in place. That's a tough one.
Access is tough. Access is tough. Language is a part of that, too. You really need to help people where they are. The nonprofits, some of them are large. I could name a couple that Samaritas, Access, they're large, but there are lots of smaller nonprofits that are out there worried about the food, worried about the housing. And even the federal dollars that we're flowing through, or still are, they're short term. And so what we want to do is fix the longer term and try to get these individuals into a state where they can take care of themselves.
Yeah. The second point that you all bring up as being a big problem is the poor public perception that this problem has. I guess that's just sort of, I can't avoid politics. I get back to this is a political issue right now. How do you try and solve the poor public perception that you think the immigrant community is facing?
Oh, you're right. So you really have to face it by saying, these are people. Do you care about your fellow person that's next to you, whatever their circumstance, and make it a real, a crisis of what's fair, what's right, and how you do the best for everyone.
Yeah. The last 2 components of the big 4 problems that you see are both about funding. And that one is obviously problematic right now in a time when there doesn't seem to be money for a lot of things. But this is, I guess, where you're hoping that the partnerships that you're bringing to bear, foundations and nonprofits and the service family, can all sort of step up to the plate.
Well, actually, everyone can step up. And contributions can be made to any of the public charities. They can be made to the Community Foundation. I'm not here to promote that, but I am saying that, look around. Everybody can do their part. The foundations are going to come together and try to be as effective as we can as a group. And if there's a strategy that we can use, because these organizations are depending more and more on private support every day.
What was the original, what led you to try and do this drill down to see just where we are? Was there a specific condition, situation, or moment that led you to want to dig into this?
I think it's what happens to us often, in that you get a feeling that there's something out there you don't understand.
Yeah.
That we kept hearing more, and as these smaller nonprofits kept saying, we need your help, the other dollars aren't here. That's how we really said, okay, it's time to take a look at this. And believe me, I learned a lot. I think others can learn a lot. The report is a public report. It's online. You can come to our Community Foundation website. 4th, I didn't understand that.
You lead this massive foundation for the community, and that's what was my last question. You've learned a lot about your own community through doing this already.
Absolutely. Data is important. Data is one of the first things that can drive you to action.
Yeah. Miriam, thanks so much for being here and talking about it. Good luck with it as you proceed. Data also tells us that there is too much financial illiteracy in the city of Detroit. How do we fix that? That's next on Flashpoint.
Broadway's Come From Away is a Best Musical winner all across North America. This stirring and inspiring musical takes you to a place you never want to leave. Celebrate the best of humankind and the best in all of us at Come From Away.
October 1st through the 13th at the Fisher Theater. Tickets now at BroadwayInDetroit.com.
The 2019 Cadillacs are made to move and made to shine. GM employees and eligible family members with a current eligible GM lease get this low mileage lease on this 2019 Cadillac XT5 for $299 per month.
Independent Independent Carpet One Floor and Home. We're more than a carpet store. We're like a one-stop shop. Wall coverings, window treatment, closet organizers, laminate, hardwood, luxury vinyl, commercial flooring, cork and bamboo, vinyl, design and area rug, and carpets. The ideas and selections are endless. Leave it to our interior design experts at Independent Carpet One. And remember, we are more than just a carpet store. We are the one store for your perfect floor.
We salute the Detroit Youth Choir.
We did our thing out there. We gave it 100%.
You represented your city.
Detroit's young people are taking America by storm.
Your state.
We are so proud of you.
On a national stage.
Detroit, your people represented.
And I love the kids.
They have not disappointed.
That's entertainment. And now the finals. The Detroit Youth Choir's fate is in your hands.
Vote for us or ABC. Yeah!
Welcome back. DIY generally means do it yourself, but a firm called Exponential ETFs is hoping we'll come to see DIY as Detroit invests in you. You look at the haves and have-nots in America, generally you will find financial literacy in great supply on one side and glaringly absent on the other. Exponential hopes to help change that, and the CEO is Phil Bach, and he is with us this morning. Phil, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
I guess a lot of people would say to you, why are you worried about trying to help create financial literacy? Your business is built on people who have money rather than people who don't, right?
Well, that's exactly right. The incentive structure in the financial services industry is geared entirely towards how much money you already have. Right. That's how people are compensated, and as a result, you have a hierarchy where institutional investors, the people that you could argue need investment advice the least, have the most access, and they have teams of people helping to optimize their investments. High net worth individuals have direct access to one-on-one financial advisors, and poor people have nothing. Poor people are seen as a risk. Right. They're not seen as a prospect, and as a result, they have the least amount of financial literacy, the least amount of financial education. And what happens when the financial services industry steps away? You have predatory lenders that come in the form of payday loans, cash advances, all sorts of nefarious activities. So we want to reverse that cycle. We feel that as leaders in the Detroit community, in the financial services industry, it's our responsibility to help as much as we can. Mm-hmm. The poverty rate right now in Detroit is 35%. The poverty rate for children is 50%. Yeah. So we want to do what we can. We're seeing this amazing resurgence and renaissance in Detroit that we're a part of. We don't want to be takers. We want to be making sure that we're not leaving people behind, and we're doing our part.
Tyrone Ross is the guy that you've appointed, who unfortunately could not be here with us this morning to talk about it because he's traveling today. But he's the guy who's going to come in and head up this effort. Tell me a little bit about what he's going to be doing. How's this going to work?
So Tyrone is a special guy, and if you don't know the name now, you will. Remember the name Tyrone Ross. He was just appointed one of Investment News 40 under 40 financial professionals, and by wealthmanagement.com, they named him the most likely person to disrupt the industry over the next 10 years. So
that's what we need, is disruption, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And so to be able to partner with someone like that for this initiative is really special for us. And the idea is we're coming in from the outside. We want to connect with the people who are already doing good work. We want to connect with local people in the community and find the people that want to hear the message. Because if people don't want to hear it, we can't say it. We want to find people that want to hear the message and see how we can help, how we can get our message out there, and how we can do our part to reverse what we see as an abandonment of a whole class of people that are unbanked, that are underbanked, and that are not participating in the financial economy.
So how will the outreach work? How does somebody who I want to be a part of that? How do they hook in?
Get in touch with us. Right now, that's what we're doing. We're trying to connect. We've had an amazing outpouring from the financial community, from people that are looking for an outlet, for a way to help. So we've had financial advisors from all over Michigan reach out to us. How can we get involved?
Good to hear.
I mean, people want to help. There's no question.
There's two different sides to this problem. And of course, on the one side, you do have people who need to understand better how to manage and handle their own money. The other side is harder, and that's the systems that are put in place. It turns out it's really expensive to be poor. And I don't mean that in a glib way, but when you're poor, your car insurance costs you more than it does somebody else. The loan that you want to get to start a business has this if you can get it, has this astronomical, interest rate attached to it, credit scores, on and on and on. How do we fix the system side of this?
You're 100% right on the source of the problem. You can't expect people to lend money if default rates are high. So what we're doing is we're studying peer-to-peer lending. We're studying different societies that we see where people are lending and the default rates are much lower. And they're lower primarily because there's more of a community involvement, there's more shame involved in defaulting. People are less inclined to default. Even if they're poor, even if it's harder for them, they will find a way to pay it back. And that creates an environment where lenders are comfortable lending. And it creates a cycle that can reverse.
The difference being that there's a closer relationship to the why is
we
why
think
is
that
the,
that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. That if you have to face people in your church every Sunday, you're going to be a lot less likely to default on a loan than you would if that loan was granted to you by a faceless corporation. So we need to figure out how to incorporate some of those community aspects to the lending that we hope to encourage.
This is one of the things that I've talked to a number of minority business leaders, and that's one of the things that they talk about. There aren't enough mentors. There aren't enough examples for people in the community, especially young people, to sort of follow. People, I guess I would say, like Tyrone. That's really a part of this, is trying to find somebody that you want to emulate.
That's exactly right. And that's why Tyrone is so critical to this project. Tyrone grew up in poverty, and he'll tell his story how he himself, he didn't know what the stock market was until he was 26 years old. 10 years later, he's appointed to Investment News 40 Under 40 in the financial services industry. It's an incredible thing. He pulled himself out of his circumstance, and he can better speak to people having experience and live those conditions and speak to them in their language, on their terms, about how they can follow his.
How's this in your in the company's best interest? What is it? What is, I guess the cynical side of me goes, what's in this for Exponential?
There is no profit motive, but there is a real incentive that me and everyone that works at Exponential ETFs can go in the morning and feel energized and feel good about what we're doing. We feel like we're doing our part. We're leading. We're not following, we're leading. We're setting the example for other financial services companies in the industry, and we think that will pay off in the long term.
How will you measure the success of what you're doing?
Well, I mean, difficult to say, but again, we're starting in Detroit, so we're starting small. We're small. Exponential is small. We're starting here in Detroit, and if we can make an impact, we can build this out nationwide, and we can do quite a bit more. But the trick is to figure out, how do we find people that want to hear the message, and how do we deliver the message in a way that they'll hear it, and help people, starting with the very, very basics of budgeting, saving, and ultimately investing, entrepreneurship, college, and home ownership.
It's a terribly important endeavor. We wish you the best of luck with it. This is an issue we've talked a lot about on the program, financial literacy and how critical it is. Thanks very much for being here, Phil. Good to meet you. We'll have you and Tyrone back again in the future and see how it's going. Meet the Press coming up next. Thank you so much for being here. Hope you have a great week. Go Lions. Home opener this afternoon over at Ford Field, and we'll see you next time right back here on Flashpoint.